The millionaire froze at the sight of the delicate young woman fleeing alone in the rain. She was trembling, soaked, like someone carrying a secret that could destroy everything. When he tried to protect her, he realized that her purity hid a danger, and in that instant, destiny bound the two of them in an unbreakable way. Marina had always believed the world was too big for someone like her. Small, not just in stature, but in the way she occupied spaces, as if apologizing for existing. Her steps were light, almost silent, and her presence was rarely noticed. She had grown up that way, shaped by an environment where silence was the only safe language and fear, the only constant companion. At 26, Marina worked as a cleaning assistant at Skyline Tower, one of the most luxurious commercial buildings in the Canary Wharf area of London. The building rose imposingly against the grey metropolitan sky, its 23 floors of mirrored glass reflecting the incessant movement of the city. Inside, hurried executives, impeccably suited businessmen and elegant secretaries moved with speed and purpose, while Marina cleaned corridors, emptied bins, and polished bathroom mirrors. Invisible. Always invisible. She didn't mind being invisible. In fact, she preferred it. Being noticed meant being judged, and judgments brought pain. She had learned that too early when she was still a child. Raised by her maternal grandmother after her parents left her at a religious boarding school at the age of 5, Marina grew up between cold walls and strict rules. The boarding school was in the heart of the Yorkshire Dales, far from everything and everyone, a place where affection was considered weakness and discipline, the highest virtue. The nuns who ran the place believed the body was a source of sin and that touch, even the most innocent, could corrupt the soul. Marina learned not to touch and not to be touched. She learned that hugs were dangerous, that human warmth burned more than it warmed. On Sundays, while other girls received visits from family, she remained alone in the empty courtyard watching the trees sway in the wind. Her grandmother appeared once a year at Christmas with a harsh expression and cutting words. She said Marina should be grateful for having a roof over her head and food on her plate. She said that girls like her, abandoned by their own parents, had no right to complain about anything. At 18, Marina left the boarding school and went to live with her grandmother in a cramped studio flat in the East End of London. Their cohabitation was brief and tense. Her grandmother passed away 6 months later, leaving Marina alone in the world, with a small sum of money and a suitcase full of old clothes. Without academic qualifications beyond incomplete secondary education, without professional experience, and with a paralyzing fear of interacting with strangers, Marina found a job as a cleaning assistant through a human resources agency that didn't ask too many questions. The work was hard, but she dedicated herself diligently. She woke up at 4 in the morning, took 2 crowded buses to Canary Wharf, and arrived at Skyline Tower at 6 o'clock sharp. She put on her navy blue uniform, tied her brown hair in a tight bun, and began her shift. She cleaned bathrooms, corridors, meeting rooms. She collected forgotten coffee cups, crumpled papers, leftover food. She did everything with care and attention to detail, as if each task was a way to atone for something she had never committed. Her colleagues were cordial but distant. Marina didn't participate in lively conversations during breaks, didn't laugh at jokes told in the changing room. She sat in a corner, ate her bread and butter in silence, and returned to work as soon as the clock allowed. Some thought she was arrogant, others just strange. No one imagined that behind that facade of indifference there was a woman who desperately wished to be seen, understood, loved. But fear was greater than desire. Marina was afraid of men. Not all, not always, but the fear was there, deeply rooted in her psyche. At the boarding school, a physical education teacher used to observe her with a gaze that made her feel dirty. He never touched her, but the words he whispered when he passed close to her were enough to plant seeds of terror. She was only 12 and didn't understand why it made her feel so much shame. Later, at 16, one of the gardeners tried to corner her in an isolated part of the courtyard. Marina screamed, and he retreated, but the feeling of vulnerability never left her. Since then, she avoided situations that required physical proximity. She never dated, never kissed, never allowed anyone to cross the invisible barrier she had built around herself. The virginity she carried was not an emblem of purity or religious devotion. It was armor, protection against the pain of being exposed, of being touched, of being seen in her rawest vulnerability. At 26, Marina lived in a small rented room in Hackney, sharing an apartment with 3 other women who worked different shifts. They rarely met. Marina's life revolved around work, her cramped room, and the few moments of solitude when she allowed her true passion to emerge: art. Since childhood, Marina had drawn. At the boarding school, she stole scraps of paper from bins and broken pencils from classrooms. She drew flowers, birds, imaginary landscapes. She drew worlds where she was free, where touch didn't scare, where love didn't hurt. As she grew, she also started to write. Small poems, fragments of thoughts, reflections on pain and hope. In time, she discovered watercolor, and those timid drawings gained vibrant colors, layers of meaning. They were works that spoke of loneliness, but also of a silent strength, of cracks that let the light in. Marina kept everything hidden. She stored the watercolors and poems in a cardboard box under her bed, as if they were shameful secrets. She had never shown them to anyone. She thought they weren't good enough, that no one would be interested, that exposing her art would be like exposing her soul, and that was too risky. At Skyline Tower, Marina had a supervisor named Claudia, a woman in her 40s with platinum blonde dyed hair and always immaculate nails. Claudia was married but unhappy, and she took out her frustrations on her subordinates. She had a cruel way of humiliating, always with a fake smile on her lips, always in front of other people, so that the humiliation was public and therefore more effective. Marina was an easy target, quiet, submissive, unable to defend herself. Claudia reprimanded her several times for non-existent errors, accused her of laziness when Marina was clearly exhausted, ridiculed her discreet appearance and simple clothes. Marina endured everything in silence, lowering her head, biting her lip, swallowing her tears. But what Marina didn't know was that Claudia had a specific reason to hate her. Gabriel Ashton, the owner of Skyline Tower, was observing Marina, not obviously, not in a way anyone else would notice, but Claudia did. Claudia, who had been trying for years to catch Gabriel's attention with suggestive smiles, low-cut clothes, and strategically placed conversations, noticed that he looked at that insignificant girl with an attention he had never given her, and that filled her with poisonous jealousy. Gabriel Ashton was 34 years old and the owner of a fortune built with great effort. He had inherited the building from his father, who had passed away 8 years prior, leaving him responsible not only for the business but also for his younger sister, Sophia. Sophia was 22 and had Down syndrome. She was a sweet, intelligent and lively young woman, but required special care. Their mother had left when Sophia was just a baby, unable to cope with the reality of having a child with special needs. Their father, a rigid and distant man, never recovered from the abandonment and raised his children with emotional severity, teaching Gabriel that feelings were weaknesses and that responsibility came before everything. Gabriel grew up being the provider, the protector, the problem solver. He learned to calculate, to plan, to control. But he never learned to connect emotionally with other people. He had few friends, no lasting relationships. The women who approached him were interested in his bank account, not in who he truly was. Over time, Gabriel got used to loneliness. He began to avoid unnecessary social interactions, preferring the company of spreadsheets, reports, and numbers. He developed a mild social phobia, not incapacitating, but present enough to make meetings and gatherings a constant source of discomfort. What no one knew was that Gabriel observed people. He observed a lot, and for a few weeks he had started observing Marina. He couldn't explain why. There was something in the way she moved, always carefully, always silently, something in the way she lowered her eyes. When someone passed, as if apologizing for existing, Gabriel recognized that. He recognized the loneliness, the fear, the feeling of being out of place in the world. He saw her arrive every morning, punctual, in her impeccable uniform and with her hair tied back. He saw how she cleaned with meticulous attention, as if every task was important. He also saw how Claudia treated her, and that deeply bothered him. But Gabriel didn't know how to intervene. He wasn't good with words. He didn't know how to offer comfort. So he just watched in silence, hoping that perhaps one day he would find the courage to approach her. The night everything changed was a rainy Tuesday in June. London was plunged into a violent storm, one of those that make the city stop. The sky was black, lightning cut across the horizon, and the wind howled between the buildings. Marina was finishing her shift when Claudia called her for a conversation in the cleaning supplies room. Marina knew nothing good would come of it, but she had no choice but to obey. Inside the small, cramped room, Claudia closed the door and crossed her arms. Her face was twisted into an expression of poorly disguised anger. "You think you're clever, don't you, Marina?" Claudia said, spitting the name as if it were an insult. "You think no one notices?" Marina blinked, confused. "Notices what, madam?" "Don't play innocent. I know you've been flirting with Dr. Ashton. I saw how you look at him." Marina felt her blood run cold. "I never—" she began, but Claudia interrupted her. "Shut up. You're a nobody. Understood? A cleaner. You think a man like him would look at you? You think you have a chance? You're pathetic." The words were sharp blades cutting deep. Marina felt tears well up, but fought to hold them back. She didn't want to give Claudia the satisfaction of seeing her cry. "Furthermore," Claudia continued, approaching, her eyes gleaming with malice, "I'm going to fire you. I don't need incompetent people here. You're slow, inattentive, useless." Marina knew that wasn't true. She knew Claudia was lying, that the reason behind those accusations was pure envy. But the injustice hurt more than any truth. She felt her chest tighten, the air thinning. She needed to get out of there. She needed to breathe. Without saying a word, Marina pushed the door open and ran out. She ran through the corridor, down the emergency stairs, past the empty lobby. The night security guard shouted something, but she didn't hear. She just wanted to flee, to be far away, to disappear. The rain hit her as soon as she left the building. It was a heavy, cold rain that drenched her in seconds. Marina had no umbrella. She had no coat. She wore only her thin navy blue uniform and a pair of worn trainers. But she didn't care. She walked along the empty pavement, her shoulders hunched, her arms crossed over, her chest. The rain washed her face, mixing with the tears that finally streamed freely. She walked without direction, without destination. She just walked, feeling the cold penetrate her bones, the water running down her hair, her neck, her back. It was as if the external storm reflected the internal storm she had always carried, and for a few moments Marina wished the rain would carry her away, dissolve her, make her disappear. That's when she heard a voice. "Wait." Marina stopped. She turned slowly. Through the curtain of rain, she saw a figure approaching. A tall man, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that was already soaked. He carried a coat in his hands. Gabriel Ashton. Marina was paralyzed. Her eyes widened, her heart pounded. He was there, in the rain, looking at her with an expression she couldn't decipher. It wasn't pity, it wasn't judgment. It was something softer, deeper. "You'll get sick," Gabriel said, his voice firm but gentle. He held the coat out to her. "Please, take it." Marina looked at the coat, then at him. Her whole body trembled, but it wasn't just from the cold, it was from fear. Fear of getting close, fear of accepting help, fear that this gesture of kindness would turn into something that would hurt her. "I can't," she whispered, her voice almost inaudible beneath the sound of the rain. Gabriel frowned. "Why not?" Marina lowered her eyes. The words came out before she could stop them. "I'm scared." "Scared of me?" She nodded, still unable to look at him. Gabriel was silent for a long moment. Then, with a careful movement, he took a step back, increasing the distance between them. He placed the coat over her shoulder without touching her, just letting the fabric fall gently. "I won't hurt you," he said, his voice low, almost a murmur. "I would never do that." Marina looked up and met his eyes. They were dark, deep eyes, but there was a sadness in them that she recognized, a loneliness that mirrored her own. And for some reason, that made her feel that maybe, just maybe, he was telling the truth. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice trembling. Gabriel hesitated. "I saw you run out. I was worried." "No one has ever worried about me before," Marina said, and the phrase came out more as a confession than a statement. "Well, now someone does," Gabriel replied. They stood there in the rain, two strangers united by a shared loneliness. Marina didn't know what to say, what to do. Part of her wanted to run again, but another part, a small, fragile part that had been dormant for years, wanted to stay. "You need to get out of the rain," Gabriel said, breaking the silence. "I can call a taxi for you." Marina nodded, unable to speak. Gabriel took out his phone but realized it was too wet to work. He looked around, searching for a solution, and then pointed to the building entrance. "Let's go back inside, just until the rain lets up a bit." Marina followed him, her steps uncertain, the coat heavy on her shoulders. They entered the empty lobby. The security guard looked at them in surprise, but Gabriel signaled for him not to approach. Marina was trembling violently now, her teeth chattering, her skin pale. Gabriel guided her to one of the lobby sofas. "You're freezing. I'll get a towel." He disappeared for an instant and returned with some clean towels. He handed them to Marina, who accepted them with trembling hands and began to dry her face, her hair. Gabriel moved away, giving her space, but remained nearby, watching her with concern. "What happened?" he asked softly. Marina didn't answer immediately. She didn't know if she should tell him, if she had the right to confide in a stranger, even if that stranger was the owner of the building where she worked. But the words began to come out, slowly, hesitantly. "My supervisor said she's going to fire me." "Why?" "Because she thinks I—" Marina stopped, unable to continue, her cheeks flushed with shame. Gabriel understood. He took a deep breath, his jaw clenched. "Claudia said that?" Marina nodded. "She has no authority to fire anyone," Gabriel said, his voice firm. "I do, and you're not going to lose your job." Marina looked at him, surprised. "Why are you doing this?" Gabriel hesitated again. He didn't know how to explain that. Somehow he felt a connection with this woman he barely knew. He didn't know how to say that he saw a reflection of himself in her. "Because it's not fair," he said finally, "and because you don't deserve to be treated like that." Marina felt something stir within her, a strange, unfamiliar sensation. It wasn't exactly hope, but perhaps it was the beginning of it. They stayed there for a few more minutes in silence, listening to the rain beat against the windows. And, for the first time in a long time, Marina didn't feel completely alone. The days that followed that rainy night were different. Marina couldn't explain exactly what had changed, but she felt that something inside her had shifted, like a stone that after years in the same place had finally rolled a few inches. Small but significant. Gabriel had kept his word. The next morning, Claudia was called to his office. Marina didn't know exactly what was said in that conversation, but when Claudia left, her face was red with contained anger and her eyes gleamed with something that looked like humiliation. From that day on, Claudia barely looked at Marina. There were no more malicious comments, no more public humiliations, just a cold, distant silence. Marina should have been relieved, and in part she was, but she also felt a new discomfort, an irrational guilt. She didn't like causing problems, being a source of conflict. She preferred invisibility to attention, even if that attention came from someone who protected her. Gabriel, for his part, didn't mention the incident. In the first few days after that night, Marina barely saw him. He remained in his office on the 23rd floor, a kind of glass and steel fortress where few had access. Marina cleaned the lower floors, rarely going up there, but occasionally she would cross paths with him in the elevator or the lobby. When that happened, he would nod briefly, a discreet, almost imperceptible gesture. She would respond with an even more timid nod, her eyes quickly looking away. But Gabriel was present in other ways, small, subtle, almost invisible. A week after the rainy night, Marina found a new umbrella leaning against her locker in the changing room. It was a simple, black umbrella, nothing special, but it came with a discreet note that simply said, "For rainy days." There was no signature, but Marina knew who had left it there. Her heart raced and she carefully put the umbrella away, as if it were a treasure. A few days later, during her break, she found a small box on the pantry table. Inside, there was an artisanal chocolate truffle wrapped in gold paper. Another note accompanied it. Everyone deserves a little sweetness. Marina ate the truffle slowly, savoring each piece, feeling that it wasn't just the sweet treat that warmed her chest, but the gesture itself. Gabriel didn't approach directly. He didn't force conversations, didn't invade her space. He seemed to understand instinctively that Marina needed time, safe distance, but he left traces of kindness, crumbs of care that she collected with silent gratitude. Marina started to smile again. Not much, not for everyone, but she smiled. Small smiles that bloomed when she least expected them. When she opened her locker and saw the umbrella, when she passed the reception and the security guard, who had barely noticed her before, greeted her cordially, when she realized that the world, perhaps, was not entirely hostile. However, the fear was still there, rooted, pulsating. Marina continued to avoid touch, physical contact. When someone accidentally bumped into her, her body would stiffen, and she needed a few seconds to compose herself. She felt ridiculous for it, childish, but she couldn't control it. Sometimes at night, lying in her cramped room in Hackney, Marina thought about Gabriel. She tried to understand why he cared, what he saw in her. Was it pity, charity, or was there something more? And if there was something more, what did it mean? Marina didn't know how to deal with these questions, so she pushed them away, buried them deep, and tried to sleep. Gabriel, however, also thought about her, more than he would like to admit. He didn't fully understand what attracted him to Marina. It wasn't conventional beauty, although she had a delicate face, large, expressive eyes. It wasn't her outgoing personality, for she was the opposite of that. But there was something in her fragility, in the way she struggled to stay whole despite everything, that touched something deep within him. Gabriel recognized that struggle. He himself fought his own silent battles, the social phobia that made him avoid unnecessary events and meetings, the difficulty in expressing emotions, in connecting with other people, the constant feeling of being on the outside, watching life happen without truly participating in it. And there was Sophia, his sister, his responsibility, his joy, and his burden. Gabriel loved Sophia deeply, but he couldn't deny that caring for her alone was exhausting. Sophia attended a specialized institution during the day, where she learned practical skills and socialized with other young people. But at night and on weekends, Gabriel was her only support. He helped her with simple tasks, took her on outings, ensured she took her medication. It was a routine he had accepted without question, but which at times left him exhausted and lonely. Gabriel had never dated seriously. There had been a few women over the years, casual encounters, brief relationships that never evolved into anything significant. The women who were interested in him usually wanted something he couldn't give: constant attention, a busy social life, spontaneous trips. Gabriel was predictable, reserved, committed to his responsibilities, and sooner or later they would get tired and leave. He had accepted that perhaps he wasn't made for relationships, that loneliness was his destiny. But observing Marina, seeing his own loneliness reflected in her, Gabriel felt something awaken, a desire to get closer, to break down the barriers they had both built. He didn't know how to do it, but he wanted to try. That's when something unexpected happened. One Thursday afternoon, Gabriel was in his office reviewing contracts when his secretary, Mrs. Celia, a 60-year-old woman who had worked with him for decades, knocked on the door. "Dr. Ashton, may I come in?" "Of course, Mrs. Celia." She entered carrying a small framed canvas. "I found this in the 12th floor storage room. It must have fallen from somewhere during cleaning. I thought it was so beautiful that I thought you'd like to see it." Gabriel took the canvas and, looking at it, felt something tighten in his chest. It was a watercolor, delicate, vibrant, yet imbued with a deep melancholy. It depicted an open window with fluttering curtains, and outside a stormy sky. But on the windowsill there was a single red flower, small and resilient, defying the storm. The technique was simple, almost amateurish, but there was a raw emotion there that touched Gabriel in a way he couldn't explain. It was as if the painting spoke directly to him, as if the person who created it perfectly understood what it was like to live in the midst of a storm and still try to bloom. "Do you know whose it is?" Gabriel asked. Mrs. Celia shook her head. "No idea. It was in a box in the storage room, along with some old papers. Must have been forgotten by someone." Gabriel looked at the canvas for a few more seconds, then carefully placed it on his desk. "I'll investigate. Thank you, Mrs. Celia." She left, and Gabriel was alone with the painting. He lightly ran his fingers over the frame, feeling an inexplicable connection to that work. Whoever created it knew pain and hope. In the following days, Gabriel tried to find out who the artist was. He discreetly asked some employees, but no one knew. The box where the canvas was found contained old documents, some belonging to companies that no longer operated in the building. It seemed like a dead end, but Gabriel didn't give up. Something inside him insisted that the painting was important, that he needed to find out who made it. So he decided to act differently. He placed the canvas on a small improvised stand at the building's reception with a note next to it. "Artist of this work wanted. Please contact administration." Marina saw the painting the following Monday when she arrived for her shift. She was walking past the reception when something made her stop. She turned slowly, and seeing the canvas displayed felt her blood run cold. It was hers. It was one of her watercolors. Her heart pounded. Her hands began to tremble. How did that end up there? She remembered that painting. She had made it a few months ago on a particularly difficult night when loneliness weighed like lead. She had kept it in a folder with others, but the folder was in the box under her bed. How did it get to the building? And then Marina remembered. Weeks ago, she had brought the box to work because she needed space in her room. She planned to leave it temporarily in the storage room until she could rent a larger space. But in the confusion of being humiliated by Claudia, she had completely forgotten about the box. Probably someone had found it and, rummaging through its contents, discovered the painting. Marina felt panic rising. That was her soul exposed. Her vulnerability transformed into art, now displayed for all to see. She couldn't allow it. She couldn't. She looked around, desperate. The reception was empty. The security guard was talking on the phone, distracted. Marina approached the canvas, her hands still trembling, and read the note. Artist wanted. She should take the canvas back, hide it, pretend none of it existed. But she couldn't. Something stopped her. Maybe it was fear of being discovered, or maybe deep down a part of her wished to be seen. Marina backed away, taking a deep breath, and headed to the changing room. She changed her clothes mechanically, her mind racing. What should she do? Reveal herself? Remain silent? What if someone found out? What if Gabriel found out? Throughout the day, Marina tried to focus on work, but it was impossible. Every time she passed the reception, she looked at the canvas and her stomach churned. She saw other people stop to observe it too. Some commented on the colors, others on the emotion conveyed. Marina heard everything from afar, her face burning with shame and, surprisingly, a little pride. At the end of her shift, as she was putting away the cleaning supplies, Marina felt a presence behind her. She turned and found Gabriel standing there, his hands in his pockets, his gaze hesitant. "Marina," he said, his voice soft. "May I speak with you?" She nodded, unable to articulate words. Gabriel looked around, making sure they were alone, and continued. "I saw you looking at the painting today. Several times." Marina's heart raced, even faster. She began, but didn't know how to finish. "It's yours, isn't it?" Gabriel said, and it wasn't a question. Marina swallowed hard. She wanted to deny it, but she couldn't. She couldn't lie to him. So she just nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor. Gabriel took a step forward but stopped when he realized Marina had instinctively recoiled. He sighed, maintaining his distance. "It's beautiful," he said. "Truly beautiful." Marina looked up, surprised. "You like it?" "Very much. There's something in it that—" Gabriel hesitated, searching for the right words. That speaks to me, as if the person who painted it understands what it's like to feel lost, but still keep trying. The words hit Marina like a wave. No one had ever understood her paintings like that. No one had ever seen them, in fact. And there was Gabriel, not just looking, but seeing, truly seeing. "It's just a hobby," Marina murmured, looking away again. "It's nothing professional." "It doesn't have to be professional to be meaningful," Gabriel said. "Art isn't about technique. It's about what you convey. And you convey a lot." Marina felt tears well up but held them back. "Why did you put it in the reception?" "Because I wanted to find the artist and because I thought something so beautiful deserved to be seen." Marina shook her head. "I don't want people to see it. It's too personal." Gabriel nodded, understanding. "I'll take the canvas down. I'm sorry if I made you uncomfortable. That wasn't my intention." Marina wanted to say that it was okay, that he didn't need to apologize. But the words were stuck in her throat. So she just murmured an almost inaudible thank you. Gabriel watched her for another moment and then said something that surprised her. "Do you have more paintings?" Marina hesitated but then nodded. "I'd like to see them. Only if you want to, of course. No pressure." Marina didn't know what to answer. Part of her wanted to scream no, that it was too intimate, too vulnerable. But another part, that small, fragile part that wished to be seen, whispered, "Yes." I need to think," she said finally. Gabriel smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Of course. When and if you want to, I'll be here." He then moved away, leaving Marina alone with her turbulent thoughts. She stood there for long minutes, her heart pounding, her mind trying to process everything that had just happened. That night, returning home, Marina took the box from under her bed and opened it carefully. Inside, there were dozens of watercolors, handwritten poems, unfinished sketches. She looked at each one, recalling the moment she created them, the emotions that inspired them. They were pieces of her, fragments of her soul, and for the first time, Marina wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, it would be safe to share those pieces with someone, with Gabriel. The following days were strange. Marina continued her work, but now there was a new tension in the air. Gabriel didn't pressure her, didn't mention the paintings again, but whenever they crossed paths, he smiled, and that smile said, "I'm here, when you're ready." And then, one Friday afternoon, Marina made a decision. With trembling hands, she took 3 of her favorite watercolors, carefully wrapped them in brown paper, and left the package at the reception, addressed to Gabriel Ashton. She didn't write any explanatory note. She didn't need to. When Gabriel received the package, he opened it in his office alone. Seeing the paintings, he felt something inside him open, up. Each one was different, but all carried the same deep emotion. One depicted a half-open door with light spilling through it. Another, a hand extended towards a starry sky. The third, a bridge over a stormy river, fragile but resilient. Gabriel spent hours observing every detail, every brushstroke, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone, because there, in those paintings, was someone who understood, someone who, like him, fought against their own loneliness and desperately sought a way to cross the bridge to the other side. The next day, Marina found an envelope, slipped under her locker. Inside, there was a simple card with only a few handwritten words. "Thank you for sharing this with me. You are braver than you imagine." Marina kept the card with her paintings, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel something close to hope. October arrived, bringing the typical warmth of London's autumn. The plane trees shed their leaves, painting the city in shades of brown and gold, and the air had that characteristic scent of rain that was about to come, but still hesitated. Marina felt something changing within her too, as if autumn wasn't just outside but beginning to bloom timidly in her chest. Since she had shared her paintings with Gabriel, something had shifted between them. It wasn't a declared friendship, nor an obvious romance. It was something more subtle, deeper. A silent understanding. He continued to leave small gestures in her path. A book of English poetry that appeared in her locker, a cup of hot chocolate in the pantry during a cold morning, a simple note with a quote from a poet. Freedom is not enough. What I desire has no name yet. Marina kept every note, as if it were a treasure. At night in her room she reread the words, trying to understand what Gabriel meant. He spoke through gestures and quotes, never directly, and she, in turn, responded in the same way. She left small drawings in his path. Once, a pencil sketch of a steaming coffee cup. Another time, a small watercolor of a bird flying out of an open cage. They communicated in a language of their own, made of symbols and silences. And, strangely, it worked. However, the past is never truly buried, and Marina's was about to resurface in a way she never expected. It was a Tuesday when Marina arrived home and found a letter slipped under her bedroom door. The envelope was yellowed, as if it had been kept for years, and there was no sender, just her name, handwritten in a script she didn't recognize. Marina picked up the letter with trembling hands and sat on the bed. Her heart was already beating faster, as if sensing that something bad was coming. She opened the envelope slowly, almost fearfully, and pulled out the sheet of paper. The first words hit her like a punch. "Marina, do you remember me? I am Sister Benedicta from St. Mary's Abbey School. I know many years have passed since you left our institution, but there is something I need to tell you, something I should have told you a long time ago." Marina felt the air leave her lungs. Sister Benedicta. Of course she remembered. She was one of the strictest nuns at the boarding school, the one who administered the harshest punishments, who believed that discipline was the only way to save the lost souls of abandoned girls. The letter continued. "During the years you were with us, we treated you with rigor because we believed it was right. But now at the end of my life I realize that we failed. We failed you and so many other girls. The way we dealt with your fears, your difficulties, was cruel. I was cruel, and I ask for your forgiveness. There is something you need to know. Your mother did not abandon you by choice. She was young, very young, and her parents forced her to leave you at the boarding school. She came back several times, tried to get you, but we stopped her. We said it was better for you that she was not in a position to raise you. But we were wrong. She cried a lot, Marina. She begged to see you and we refused. She passed away 2 years ago. She never married, never had other children. You were the love of her life, and she spent her entire existence punishing herself for having lost you. She left a letter for you, which I still keep. If you wish, please contact me. I need to return what is rightfully yours." The letter ended with a phone number and an address in a small town in the Yorkshire Dales. Marina read and reread the letter countless times. Tears streamed down her face, blurring the words, but she didn't stop. Each sentence was a stab, reopening wounds she thought had healed. Her mother hadn't abandoned her. Her mother had tried. Her mother had loved her, and Marina never knew. The pain was unbearable. It was as if everything she had believed about herself, about her story, collapsed in an instant. She wasn't the rejected, unwanted girl. She was the stolen girl. Stolen from a love that had always existed, but was denied to her by people who thought they knew best. Marina didn't know how long she stayed there, sitting on the bed, holding the letter, crying. It could have been minutes or hours. When she finally managed to move, it was already night. She looked out the window and saw the illuminated city outside, indifferent to her pain. She needed air. She needed to go out, walk, do anything to keep herself from completely falling apart. Marina left the apartment aimlessly. She walked through the streets of Hackney, past crowded pubs, laughing couples, people living their normal lives. Everything seemed so distant, so unreal. How could the world keep spinning when hers had just been turned upside down? She didn't realize where her feet were taking her until she was standing in front of Skyline Tower. It was late, past 10 at night. The building was almost empty, only a few lights on in the upper floors. Marina looked up and without thinking went inside. The night security guard, Mr. George, recognized her and greeted her. Marina mumbled a weak hello and headed towards the elevator. She pressed the button for the 23rd floor. She didn't know exactly why she was doing it. She didn't know if Gabriel would be there. But something pulled her, a desperate need not to be alone at that moment. The elevator doors opened on Gabriel's floor. The corridor was silent, lit only by emergency lights. Marina walked slowly to his office door. There was light coming from inside. He was there. She knocked softly, almost inaudibly. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the door opened, and Gabriel was there. His tie loosened, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his hair slightly disheveled. "Marina," he said, surprised. "What happened?" She didn't answer. She couldn't. The words were stuck, choked by emotion. Gabriel observed her for a moment, and then with a careful gesture opened the door wider. "Come in." Marina entered the office. It was a spacious room, with a wall entirely of glass that offered a panoramic view of London at night. There was a large, dark wooden desk, shelves filled with books and documents, and a leather sofa in the corner. Gabriel guided her to the sofa and sat in a nearby armchair, maintaining distance. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" he asked, his voice gentle. Marina took a deep breath, trying to control herself. Then, slowly, she began to speak. She told him about the letter, about Sister Benedicta, about the mother she never knew, but who had loved her. The words came out brokenly, mixed with sobs, but she didn't stop. For the first time in her life, Marina allowed herself to completely pour out her heart. Gabriel listened in silence, without interrupting. His face was serious, but his eyes reflected a deep sadness, a genuine empathy. When Marina finished, exhausted, he remained silent for a few moments, as if processing everything he had heard. "I'm so sorry," he said finally. "No one deserves to go through that." "I never knew," Marina whispered. "I always thought she didn't want me, that I wasn't good enough to be loved." "You were always good enough," Gabriel said, his voice firm. "The mistake was never yours." Marina looked up and met his eyes. There was something there, an intensity that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. "Why do you care about me?" she asked, her voice fragile. "Why do you do all this?" Gabriel hesitated. The question was direct, and he wasn't good with direct answers. But looking at Marina, seeing her vulnerability, her pain, he knew he couldn't run away. "Because I understand you," he said simply. "Because when I look at you, I see someone who is fighting to survive in a world that hasn't been kind. And I know what that's like." Marina blinked, surprised. "You—" Gabriel nodded. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "My mother left us when I was 12. Sophia was only 2. She couldn't cope with the reality of having a child with special needs. My father never forgave her, and he never forgave Sophia either. In a way. He blamed her, even without saying it. And I had to be the adult. I had to care, provide, protect. I never had space to be vulnerable, to admit I was scared, alone." He paused, his voice getting lower. "I learned to control everything, emotions, relationships, situations, because if I didn't control, everything would fall apart. But the price of that was never truly learning to connect with anyone. I'm as afraid of closeness as you are. Only, in my case, the fear disguises itself as control." Marina stood up and approached slowly. Gabriel turned, and they stood there, a few steps from each other, two broken beings recognizing their mutual cracks. "I don't know how to do this," Marina admitted. "I don't know how to trust, how to open up, how to let someone in." "Neither do I," Gabriel replied. "But maybe we can learn together." They looked at each other for a long moment, and then, in an impulse that surprised both of them, Marina extended her hand. Gabriel looked at her hand, hesitated, and then took it. The touch was gentle, careful, but significant. It was the first time Marina had initiated physical contact with anyone in years. The touch lasted only a few seconds before Marina recoiled, her face flushed, but it was enough. It was a beginning. The following days were difficult for Marina. The revelation about her mother profoundly affected her, unearthing emotions she had buried a long time ago. She thought about contacting Sister Benedicta, about seeking the letter her mother had left. But she wasn't ready yet. The pain was too recent, too raw. Gabriel, for his part, also faced his own battles. A week after their conversation in the office, he had an important meeting with foreign investors. It was a crucial deal that could significantly expand his ventures. But the meeting didn't go as planned. The investors were aggressive, asked difficult questions, challenged every decision. Gabriel, usually confident and controlled, began to feel the pressure mount. His chest tightened, his breath became short. He recognized the signs immediately. An anxiety attack. He apologized abruptly and left the meeting room, leaving everyone surprised. He walked quickly down the corridor, looking for a place where he could breathe, where he could compose himself. He ended up in a small, empty and silent filing room on the 15th floor. Gabriel leaned against the wall, trying to control his breathing, but it was as if the air couldn't reach his lungs. His hands trembled, his heart pounded. He closed his eyes, trying to apply the breathing techniques he had learned, but nothing worked. That's when he heard a soft voice. Gabriel. He opened his eyes and saw Marina standing at the door, her eyes wide with concern. She was on the floor cleaning and had heard his hurried movement. "Are you okay?" she asked, taking a step forward. Gabriel wanted to say yes, that everything was under control, but he couldn't. "Hayache," he shook his head, his breathing still ragged. Marina didn't hesitate. She approached him slowly, and then did something that surprised both of them. She took his hands in hers. They were small, delicate, but firm. "Breathe with me," she said, her voice calm. "Inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Gabriel tried to follow, focusing on her voice, on the gentle touch of her hands. Gradually, slowly, his breathing began to normalize. The tightness in his chest eased. The trembling in his hands stopped. They stayed there for several minutes, Marina holding Gabriel's hands, guiding his breathing. And in that moment, their roles reversed. She, who had always been the protected one, became the support. And he, who had always carried the world on his shoulders, allowed himself to be vulnerable. When Gabriel finally calmed down, he looked at Marina with deep gratitude. "Thank you," he whispered. Marina smiled, a small but genuine smile. "You did the same for me. It's only fair I return the favor." Gabriel then realized that she was still holding his hands and that she didn't seem scared or uncomfortable. She seemed, in fact, peaceful. "How did you know what to do?" he asked. "I've had anxiety attacks since I was a child," Marina admitted. "I learned some techniques over the years. They don't always work for me, but I thought I'd try them with you." "It worked," Gabriel said. "Very well." They looked at each other and something passed between them, a deeper understanding, a connection that went beyond words or gestures. It was as if, in those moments of shared vulnerability, they had seen the essence of each other, and they hadn't recoiled. Days turned into weeks, and Marina and Gabriel continued to get closer, slowly, carefully. There was no rush. Both understood that healing took time, that building trust required patience. One Saturday, Gabriel invited her to meet Sophia. Marina was nervous, but accepted. They met in Hyde Park, where Sophia liked to feed the ducks. Sophia was exactly as Gabriel had described her, sweet, cheerful, full of life. She hugged Marina without hesitation, and Marina, surprisingly, didn't recoil. She felt safe with Sophia, perhaps because there was no judgment there, only pure acceptance. "You're the painting lady," Sophia said, smiling. "Gabriel showed me. They're very beautiful." Marina looked at Gabriel, surprised. "I who showed her?" Gabriel shrugged, a little embarrassed. "She asked what I was looking at so intently I couldn't lie." Marina felt her face flush, but she wasn't angry. In fact, she was touched. Gabriel not only appreciated her art, but had shared it with the most important person in his life. They spent the afternoon together, all three of them. They walked through the park, ate popcorn, laughed at silly things. It was simple, but significant. And, for the first time, Marina felt she was part of something, of a family, even if unconventional. When night fell and they said goodbye, Sophia hugged Marina again and whispered in her ear, "You make my brother happy, thank you." The words echoed in Marina's mind for days. She made Gabriel happy. The idea was both frightening and wonderful. November brought the first heavy rains of the season. London lived under a permanently grey sky, with thunderstorms that woke the city in the middle of the night and rains that turned the streets into rivers. It was as if the weather reflected the growing tension Marina felt within herself. She had made a decision. After weeks of hesitation, she had finally decided. She had to contact Sister Benedicta. She needed her mother's letter. She needed to know the words she had never been able to hear in life. It was scary, painful, but necessary. She called the number on the letter. A weak, tired voice answered. It was Sister Benedicta. She was in a nursing home now, already 87 years old. When Marina identified herself, the nun cried. She asked for forgiveness repeatedly, her voice choked with remorse and guilt. Marina didn't know if she could completely forgive, but she said she would try. And she scheduled a trip for the end of the month. She would go to the Yorkshire Dales, get the letter, close that chapter. Gabriel offered to accompany her. Marina was tempted to accept, but she knew this was something she needed to do alone. He understood, although concern was evident in his eyes. Meanwhile, life at Skyline Tower continued. Marina and Gabriel had established their own routine. Sometimes he would go down to the floor where she worked with the excuse of checking something, but both knew it was just to see her. They exchanged a few words, timid smiles, and then each went their way. These were brief, but significant encounters. Marina had also started spending some Saturdays at Gabriel's house, getting to know Sophia better. The young woman had adored her from the first meeting, and Marina found herself increasingly comfortable in their company. Sophia had a purity that calmed Marina, a way of seeing the world without complications, without fears. It was liberating to be near her. Gabriel watched the two interact with a smile on his face. He saw how Marina, little by little, was opening up, laughing more, talking more. It was like watching a flower slowly bloom after years of dormancy. But there were still barriers. Touch, for example. Since that day in the filing room when Marina held Gabriel's hands during his anxiety attack, they had had few physical contacts. An accidental brush of hands here, a brief handshake there. Nothing more, and both felt they needed time. There was no rush. Building intimacy between two such wounded people required delicacy and patience. The night everything changed was a Thursday. Marina was working late because a big meeting was happening the next day, and the building needed to be immaculate. It was almost midnight when she finally finished. She put away the cleaning supplies, changed her clothes, and headed to the elevator. She pressed the button and waited. The doors opened and she entered. But before she could press the ground floor button, she heard a familiar voice. "Wait." It was Gabriel. He was running down the corridor, a folder under his arm. He entered the elevator beside her, panting. "Sorry, I was finishing some reports and lost track of time," he said, running a hand through his hair. Marina smiled. "Me too. Looks like we're the only ones still here." He returned the smile. "At least we have company for the descent." Gabriel pressed the ground floor button. The elevator began to descend smoothly. They stood in comfortable silence for a few seconds. Then suddenly, the elevator made a strange noise and stopped abruptly. The lights flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. Total darkness. Marina felt panic rise immediately. Her heart pounded, her breathing quickened. The darkness transported her back to the boarding school, to the nights when she was locked in the cupboard as punishment for crying, for asking for her mother. The memories hit her like violent waves. "Marina," Gabriel's voice cut through the darkness. "Are you okay?" She tried to answer, but couldn't. Her throat was constricted, the air wouldn't enter. She was having a panic attack. Gabriel realized. Even without seeing, he felt the change in her breathing, the sound of someone struggling to breathe. "Marina, listen to my voice," he said, approaching carefully. "I'm here. You're not alone. I'm going to turn on my phone's flashlight, okay?" A second later, a faint light illuminated the small space. Gabriel was there, a few inches from her, holding his phone. Marina's face was pale, her eyes wide with terror. "Breathe with me," Gabriel said, using the same technique she had used with him. "Inhale slowly, that's it, very good, now exhale." Marina tried to follow, but the panic was too strong. She huddled in the corner of the elevator, hugging her knees, trembling violently. Gabriel knelt in front of her, maintaining a respectful distance but close enough for her to know he was there. "May I touch your hand?" he asked, his voice soft. Marina nodded, desperate for anything to anchor her to reality. Gabriel took her hand in his. It was cold, trembling. He warmed it carefully, massaging gently. "You're safe," he repeated, over and over again. "I'm here. I won't let anything hurt you." Gradually, very slowly, Marina began to calm down. Gabriel's presence, the firmness of his voice, the warmth of his hands, all helped to bring her back. Her breathing regularized, the trembling subsided. "Sorry," she finally managed to whisper. I'm afraid of the dark." "You don't need to apologize," Gabriel said. "Everyone has fears." They stayed like that for several minutes, in silence, just holding each other's hands. Gabriel didn't let go even when Marina was calmer, and she didn't ask him to. It was Marina who broke the silence. "When I was little at the boarding school, they used to lock me in the dark," she said, her voice low. "When I cried, when I asked for my mother, they said I needed to learn to be strong, not to be weak. But I was just a child. I just wanted to be loved." The words came out like a confession, something she had never told anyone. Gabriel squeezed her hand tighter, a comforting pressure. "You deserve to be loved," he said. "You still do." Marina looked up and met his eyes in the faint light of the phone. "You too," she said. "You deserve it too." Gabriel swallowed hard. No one had ever told him that. All his life, he had been the provider, the protector, the responsible one. No one had ever asked what he needed, what he desired. "I don't know how to be loved," he admitted, his voice hoarse. "I don't know how to let someone in. I'm afraid of failing, of not being enough." "You are enough," Marina said, and there was so much sincerity in her voice that Gabriel almost believed it. They looked at each other for a long moment, and there, in that forced darkness, surrounded by nothing but their own truths, the barriers finally began to fall. "I've never kissed anyone," Marina confessed, her face flushing even in the dim light. "I've never allowed anyone to get this close. I've always been so scared." "Scared of what?" Gabriel asked, his voice soft. "Of being touched, of being seen, of giving myself and being rejected," Marina said, the words coming out in one breath. "At the boarding school, I learned that touch was dangerous, that my body was something to be hidden, repressed. And then when I grew up, the fear only increased. Men looked at me in ways that made me feel dirty. So I built walls so high that no one could get through." "And now?" Gabriel asked, his heart racing. "Now?" Marina hesitated, then continued. "Now I want them to fall. But I don't know how. I'm scared, but I also want to try." Gabriel let go of her hand and, with a careful movement, raised his other hand to touch her face. He stopped a few inches away, waiting for permission. "May I?" Marina nodded, barely able to breathe. Gabriel touched her face with his fingertips so gently it was almost imperceptible. He traced the line of her jaw, the curve of her cheek. Marina closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel. It was frightening, but also, strangely, comforting. "You are beautiful," Gabriel whispered. "And brave. More than you know." Marina opened her eyes, and they looked at each other. There was a tension in the air, an electricity that both felt, but neither knew how to act. It was then that the elevator lights suddenly came back on. The air conditioning hummed to life, and the elevator jolted, resuming its descent. Both blinked, adjusting their eyes to the sudden light. Gabriel recoiled, giving Marina space. She stood up, smoothing her clothes, her heart still racing, but now for different reasons. The elevator reached the ground floor, and the doors opened. They stepped out, and the night security guard came running. Dr. Ashton, are you both all right? The electrical system failed, but it's been restored. We're fine, George, Gabriel said. Thank you. The security guard moved away, and Gabriel and Marina stood there in the empty lobby, not knowing exactly what to say. I should go, Marina said finally. It's late. Gabriel nodded. Let me call a car for you. Marina accepted. They waited in silence until the car arrived. Before getting in, Marina turned to Gabriel. Thank you, she said, for being there, for everything. Gabriel smiled, a small but sincere smile. Always, he replied. Marina got into the car and he watched her leave. As he walked back into the building, Gabriel realized that something fundamental had changed between them that night. The words spoken in the dark, the shared confessions, had created an intimacy that hadn't existed before. And he wanted more. He wanted to know every layer of Marina, every story, every scar. He wanted to be the person with whom she felt safe. But he also knew they needed time. Both of them did. In the following days, Marina realized that thinking about Gabriel no longer scared her so much. In fact, she had started to look forward to the moments they crossed paths, to the notes he left, to the smiles exchanged in the corridor. One Saturday, Gabriel invited her to dinner. Just the two of them. Marina was nervous, but accepted. He picked her up in the late afternoon wearing jeans and a light blue dress shirt, more casual than she was used to seeing him. They went to a discreet Italian restaurant in Fitzrovia, away from the hustle and bustle, with candles on the tables and soft music in the background. It was romantic, and they both knew it, but neither shied away from the reality. During dinner they talked about everything and nothing. Marina spoke about her paintings, about her desire to exhibit them one day, but her fear of judgment. Gabriel spoke about Sophia, about the responsibility he felt, but also about the unconditional love she gave him. When dessert arrived, a tiramisu to share, Gabriel became serious. Marina, I need to tell you something. She felt her stomach tighten. What? Gabriel took her hands in his. Marina, I know we're still getting to know each other in many ways. I know we've only been together for a few months. But I also know with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. You made me believe that I could be loved, not for what I do or what I have, but for who I am. And I love you. I love you in a way I never imagined possible. Marina felt her heart race. I care about you too, she admitted. But I'm scared of not knowing how to do this, how to be with someone. Neither of us knows, Gabriel said. But we can learn, together, no rush, no pressure, in our own time. Marina looked at him, at this man who, like her, carried his own wounds, his own fears. And she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, they could heal each other. I'd like that, she said, her voice low but firm. Gabriel smiled, and that smile lit up his face in a way Marina had never seen. It was genuine, happy, hopeful. When they returned to the car, Gabriel held Marina's hand as they walked. It was a simple gesture, but it meant the world to both of them. Marina didn't recoil. She didn't feel fear. She felt, in fact, security. He dropped her off at her apartment door. Before she went in, Gabriel approached slowly, giving her time to back away if she wanted. But Marina didn't back away. She stood there, her heart pounding, waiting. Gabriel kissed her forehead, a soft, chaste kiss but laden with promise. Good night, Marina, he whispered. Good night, Gabriel, she replied. And for the first time in her life, Marina went to sleep feeling that she was not alone in the world, that there was someone who saw her, who understood her, who wanted her exactly as she was. December arrived, bringing the intense heat of London's early summer, and with it a new energy that pulsed in Marina's chest. She had returned from her trip to the Yorkshire Dales transformed. The meeting with Sister Benedicta had been painful but necessary. The nun was frail, consumed by remorse, and cried so much upon seeing Marina that she could barely speak. Her mother's letter was kept in a yellowed envelope sealed with wax. Marina opened it alone in the simple hotel room where she was staying and read every word with tears streaming down her face. Her mother, Teresa, had written about regret, about the love that never died, about the nights she cried holding the only photo she had of her daughter. She had also written about the illness that slowly consumed her and about the wish that Marina would find happiness, love, and peace. At the end of the letter, there was a phrase that was etched in Marina's heart. "Don't let fear stop you from living, my daughter. Live for me, for yourself, for all the days we lost together." Marina returned to London with those words echoing within her, and she decided it was time to truly live. No longer to hide, no longer to be ashamed of who she was or what she felt. Gabriel noticed the change immediately. Marina was different, lighter, more present. She smiled more often, spoke with more confidence. There were still moments of hesitation, still fears, but she was learning to face them. They began to see each other more regularly. Quiet dinners, walks in Hyde Park, afternoons at Gabriel's house with Sophia. The relationship evolved slowly, but with solidity. There was no rush. Both understood that building something real, something lasting, required time and care. Touch, which had once been an almost insurmountable barrier, became increasingly natural. Gabriel held Marina's hand as they walked. She rested her head on his shoulder when they watched movies with Sophia. These were small gestures but deeply significant for both of them. One Saturday afternoon, while they were at Gabriel's house, Sophia brought an old box she had found in the cupboard. "Gabby, what's in here?" she asked, curious. Gabriel opened the box and smiled with nostalgia. "These are drawings I used to make when I was a child." Marina approached, interested. "You used to draw?" Gabriel shrugged, slightly embarrassed. "I tried. I wasn't very good, but I liked it. I stopped when Dad said it was a waste of time." Marina picked up some of the drawings. They were simple, childish sketches, but there was sensitivity there. Cars, buildings, people. And among them several drawings of a little girl smiling. "That's Sophia," Gabriel explained. "I drew her because she was always happy, even when everything was difficult. She gave me hope." Sophia hugged her brother, emotional. "You always took care of me, Gabi. And you always reminded me why it was worth it," he replied, kissing the top of her head. Marina watched the scene with a pang in her chest. The relationship between them was so pure, so full of love, and she felt privileged to be a part of it now. "You should start drawing again," Marina said, returning the papers to Gabriel. "It's never too late to pick up something that makes you happy." Gabriel looked at her, surprised. "Maybe, if you teach me." Marina smiled. "We can learn together." And so, on Saturdays, while Sophia painted her own drawings at the kitchen table, Gabriel and Marina sat side by side and drew. These were simple moments, but filled with happiness. Gabriel discovered that he still enjoyed drawing, that there was still pleasure in creating something from nothing, and Marina discovered that sharing her art with someone wasn't scary when that someone understood her. It was during one of these afternoons that Gabriel made a suggestion that would change everything. "Marina, have you ever thought about showing your paintings to more people?" She stopped what she was doing, the brush suspended in the air. "What do you mean?" "Exhibit them. Have an exhibition. Your works are incredible, and other people should see them," he said, choosing his words carefully. "I know it's scary, but I think you're ready." Marina shook her head immediately. "No, I'm not. People will judge. They'll criticize. Or they'll connect," Gabriel said softly. "They'll see your story, your strength, your beauty, just like I did." Marina looked at the paintings scattered across the table. There were dozens of them. Now, watercolors of emotional landscapes, poems written in delicate calligraphy, drawings that told stories without words. It was her soul exposed, and the idea of sharing that with strangers terrified her. But her mother's words came back to her mind. "Don't let fear stop you from living." "I don't know," she said, hesitant. "You don't have to decide now," Gabriel said, "but think about it, and if you decide you want to, I'll help you, with everything." Marina promised to think, but the idea didn't leave her mind for the next few days. An exhibition. To show the world what she had always hidden. It was terrifying. but also somehow liberating. A week later, Marina made her decision. She was in her room, looking at the box of paintings, when she finally admitted to herself, she wanted to do this. She wanted her art to be seen. Not for fame, not for recognition, but because perhaps, just perhaps, her works could touch someone in the same way that the art of others had always touched her. She called Gabriel, her hands trembling. "I want to do the exhibition," she said as soon as he answered. There was a pause, and then Gabriel replied, his voice full of pride and happiness. "Are you sure?" "I'm scared," Marina admitted. "But I want to try. I need to try." "Then let's make it happen," Gabriel said. In the following days, Gabriel dedicated himself to making Marina's dream a reality. He knew influential people in the art world, had contacts, resources, but he did nothing without consulting Marina first. Every decision was hers. He was there merely to support, to enable. Gabriel secured a small cultural space in the Shoreditch area, an independent gallery known for promoting emerging artists. The owner, a middle-aged gentleman named Anthony, was enchanted by Marina's works when he saw them. "This has soul," he said, holding one of the watercolors. "It has truth. People will feel that." Marina, who was present at the meeting, blushed with both embarrassment and gratitude. They scheduled the exhibition for the end of January, giving Marina time to select the works, frame them properly, and prepare emotionally. Gabriel insisted on paying all costs, but Marina initially refused. She didn't want to feel indebted, didn't want it to seem like charity. "It's not charity," Gabriel said firmly. "It's an investment. An investment in something I believe in someone I believe in. Please let me do this." Marina finally accepted, but she made sure to participate in every step. She personally chose the frames, helped set up the exhibition layout, wrote the explanatory texts for each work. Gabriel was by her side at all times, offering opinions when asked but always respecting her decisions. Sophia also got involved. She was responsible for making the invitations, which she lovingly designed herself. They were simple, colorful, full of life, and Marina loved them. As the exhibition date approached, Marina felt a mix of anxiety and excitement. There were nights when she couldn't sleep, imagining all possible scenarios. What if no one showed up? What if people hated her works? What if they judged her? Gabriel, always attentive, noticed when she was drowning in her own thoughts. He appeared with a hot chocolate, with a hug, with words of encouragement, and slowly Marina learned to trust, not just him, but herself. One night, 2 weeks before the exhibition, Marina and Gabriel were at her apartment. Her flatmates had gone out, and they had the place to themselves. They were in Marina's small room, surrounded by paintings, when Gabriel picked up one of the works he hadn't seen yet. It was different from the others, more raw, more visceral. It depicted a female figure with her back to the viewer, her shoulders hunched, surrounded by shadows. But in the upper right corner, there was a single open window with light pouring in. "This is new," Gabriel said, observing it carefully. Marina nodded, sitting on the bed. "I made it last night. I couldn't sleep, so I painted." "What does it represent?" Marina hesitated, then replied, "Me, or at least, who I was. The person who lived in the shadows, afraid of everything. But the window, it's hope. It's what you gave me. The possibility that maybe there's light on the other side." Gabriel turned to her, his eyes intense. "You found the light yourself, Marina. I just was here." "You were here when no one else was," Marina said, her voice choked, and that made all the difference. They looked at each other for a long moment, and then, without thinking, Marina leaned in and kissed Gabriel. It was a hesitant, inexperienced kiss, but full of emotion. Gabriel remained motionless for a second, surprised, and then reciprocated, carefully, tenderly. When they separated, Marina was blushing furiously. "Sorry, I don't know what came over me." Gabriel smiled, gently stroking her cheek with his thumb. "Don't apologize. I've been waiting for this for weeks." Marina laughed, nervously. "Really?" "Really," he confirmed, "but I wanted it to be in your time, when you were ready." I think I am, Marina said, her eyes shining. I think I'm ready for a lot of things. Gabriel kissed her again, this time with more confidence but still with care. There was no rush. They had all the time in the world. That night, they talked for hours, lying side by side on Marina's small bed, holding hands, sharing dreams, fears, plans for the future. And for the first time, Marina could imagine a future where she wasn't alone, where there was someone by her side. The week of the exhibition arrived with frightening speed. Marina had barely slept in the last few days, overcome by nervousness and anxiety. Gabriel tried to calm her as best he could, but even he was tense. He wanted everything to be perfect for her. On the day of the setup, Marina, Gabriel and Sophia went to the gallery. Anthony welcomed them with enthusiasm, and together they began to hang the works on the white walls. Marina had 30 pieces in total, including watercolors, drawings and illustrated poems. Each one told a story. Stories of pain, fear, loneliness, but also of hope, healing, and love. The centerpiece of the exhibition was a large watercolor Marina had created especially for the occasion. It depicted two human figures facing each other, with hands extended almost touching. Between them a fragile but resilient bridge. Below the title, Crossing. Gabriel looked at the work for long minutes, moved. It's us, isn't it? Marina nodded, her eyes moist. It's us, and it's anyone who has ever been afraid to connect but found the courage to try. The exhibition was titled Cracks, with the subtitle Letting the Light In. It was perfect. On opening night, a Thursday evening, Marina was paralyzed with nervousness. Gabriel held her hands, looking deep into her eyes. You can do this, he said, and I'll be here, always. Marina took a deep breath and nodded. Together, they entered the gallery. There were more people than she expected. Anthony had invited journalists, art critics, collectors, but there were also familiar faces. Mrs. Celia, Gabriel's secretary, was there with her husband. Mr. George, the security guard from Skyline Tower, also showed up, full of pride. And even some of Marina's cleaning colleagues came to show their support. People circulated through the gallery, observing the works, reading the poems, commenting in low voices. Marina saw emotional faces, moist eyes, understanding smiles, and she realized that Gabriel was right. People weren't judging, they were connecting. A middle-aged woman approached Marina with tears in her eyes. I needed to see this today, she said. Thank you for sharing your story. It gave me hope. Marina felt her chest tighten with emotion. You're welcome, she managed to say. Throughout the evening, several people approached her, sharing their own stories, thanking her for her courage, and Marina realized that her art wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever felt broken, but kept trying. At the end of the night, when the guests began to leave, Gabriel approached with something in his hands. It was a small box. I have something for you, he said. Marina opened the box and, seeing the contents, brought her hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. It was an antique brooch, delicate in the shape of a flower, silver with small red enamel details. It was my mother's, Gabriel said, his voice choked. The only thing she left. I kept it for years, not knowing what to do with it. But now I know. I want you to have it. Because you deserve to be seen, cared for, loved. And because, Marina, he hesitated, choosing the right words, because I love you. The words floated in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Marina looked at Gabriel, at this man who had seen her in her most vulnerable moments and had not recoiled, who had supported her without judgment, who had loved her exactly as she was. I love you too, she whispered, and it was true. Gabriel pulled her into a hug, and Marina allowed herself to be embraced, to be held, to be loved. There was no more fear. There was no more shame. There was only the certainty that, finally, she had found her place in the world. And that night, surrounded by her paintings, by Gabriel's presence and by the support of people she barely knew, Marina felt she had truly crossed the bridge. And on the other side there was light. The months following the exhibition were transformative, not just for Marina, but for Gabriel too, and for the bond they built together, day after day, gesture after gesture, word after word. The Cracks exhibition was a greater success than anyone could have predicted. 3 works were sold in the first week, and the buyers were not just collectors seeking investment, but people who truly connected with Marina's art. One of the watercolors, the one of the open window with the red flower on the sill, was acquired by a foundation that worked with vulnerable women. They wanted to use the image in their campaign materials as a symbol of resilience. When Marina found out, she cried, not from sadness, but from an emotion she couldn't name. It was as if her pain, transformed into art, now served to give hope to other people. It was redemption. It was purpose. Anthony, the gallery owner, suggested Marina do a second exhibition, this time larger, with a specific theme. She accepted, but was in no hurry. She wanted the next collection to be different, no longer about the pain of the past, but about the healing of the present, about new beginnings. Gabriel, for his part, also changed. He began to dedicate less time to work and more time to the people he loved. He hired a trusted manager to handle the daily operations of Skyline Tower, freeing himself to be more present. He started taking Sophia on more outings, participating in activities at the institution she attended. And, of course, he began to see Marina almost every day. They didn't live together yet, both agreed it was too early, but they spent most of their time in each other's company. Marina frequented Gabriel's house regularly, and he became a constant presence in her small room in Hackney, although he good-humoredly complained that the bed was too small for the 2 of them. Their physical relationship evolved slowly, but with depth. Marina still had moments of hesitation, instants when old fear returned like a shadow. But Gabriel was patient, always respecting her limits, always waiting for her to take the next step. There was one night, months after their first kiss, when Marina finally felt ready to completely surrender. They were at Gabriel's house. Sophia had spent the weekend with a friend from the institution, and they were alone. They had dinner together, watched a movie, talked about everything and nothing, and then, when it was late and they should have been saying goodbye, Marina simply said, "I'm ready." Gabriel understood immediately. "Are you sure?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. "I am," Marina replied, and there was conviction in her voice. "I trust you, and I want this." They went up to Gabriel's bedroom, and there, with infinite care, with tenderness that bordered on the sacred, they consummated the love that had been built for months. It was Marina's first time, and although there was an initial moment of discomfort and nervousness, Gabriel was so gentle, so attentive, that she soon relaxed. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't like in the movies, but it was real, and it was theirs. Afterwards, lying side by side in the darkness, Marina cried, not from sadness or regret, but from relief. She had finally crossed that barrier, overcome that fear, and she discovered that on the other side there was not pain, but love. Gabriel held her throughout the night, and Marina slept for the first time without nightmares. February brought. Carnival, and London transformed into a slower, emptier city, with half the population travelling to the coast or other cities. Gabriel suggested they take a small trip, just the 3 of them, him, Marina, and Sophia. They would rent a house in Cornwall, spend a few days at the beach, away from everything. Marina had never seen the sea. The revelation surprised Gabriel and Sophia, who immediately began making excited plans about everything they would do at the beach. The trip was magical. The house Gabriel rented was simple but cozy, with a sea view. On the first day, waking up and opening the bedroom window, Marina saw the blue immensity of the ocean for the first time. The smell of the sea, the sound of the waves, the feeling of infinity. Everything left her speechless. Gabriel appeared behind her, hugging her by the waist. "Beautiful, isn't it?" "Beautiful," Marina whispered, her eyes welling up. "I never imagined it could be like this." "There's still a lot of beauty in the world for you to discover," Gabriel said, kissing her shoulder. They spent days at the beach. Sophia played in the sand, building elaborate castles. Marina painted watercolors of the sea, trying to capture the different shades of blue. Gabriel, surprisingly, also started drawing again, simple sketches of the landscape, of Sophia, of Marina. One afternoon, as they walked along the beach, just the two of them, Gabriel stopped and turned to Marina. "I need to ask you something," he said, and there was nervousness in his voice. Marina felt her heart race. "What?" Gabriel took her hands in his. "Marina, I know we're still getting to know each other in many ways. I know we've only been together for a few months, but I also know with absolute certainty that I want to spend the rest of my life with you. You made me believe that I could be loved, not for what I do or what I have, but for who I am. And I love you. I love you in a way I never imagined possible." He knelt there in the sand, and Marina brought her hands to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. "Marry me," Gabriel said, taking a small box from his pocket. "Not now, not immediately, when you feel ready. But please tell me yes. Tell me we'll build a life together." Marina looked at the man kneeling in the sand, offering not just a ring but his entire future, and she had no doubt. "Yes," she said, her voice choked with emotion. 1,000 times yes. Gabriel stood up and kissed her, and there, surrounded by the sound of the waves and the immensity of the sea, they sealed the promise of a shared future. When they returned to London, the news of the engagement spread quickly. Mrs. Celia cried tears of happiness. Mr. George gave Gabriel a crushing hug. Marina's cleaning colleagues organized a small surprise party at the building. And Sophia was radiant. She would finally have the sister she always wanted. Wedding preparations began, but without haste. Marina and Gabriel agreed that they wanted something small, intimate, with only the people who truly mattered. They scheduled the ceremony for the end of the year, giving Marina time to finish her second collection of paintings and Gabriel to organize some pending business matters. But life, as always, had its own plans. In May, Marina discovered she was pregnant. The news was a shock. They always used protection, but apparently life had decided it was time. Initially, Marina panicked. Her a mother. How could she be a mother when she had barely learned to take care of herself? Gabriel, however, was radiant. He hugged Marina and said that everything would be fine, that they would figure it out together, just as they figured out everything else. Sophia, upon learning she would be an aunt, screamed with joy and immediately began planning the baby's room, choosing colors, stuffed animals, children's books. Gradually, Marina's panic gave way to cautious excitement. She and Gabriel began attending parenting classes, read books, talked to friends who already had children. And, as the months passed, and her belly grew, Marina began to imagine herself as a mother. Not a perfect mother, but a present, loving mother who would give her child everything she never had. They decided to move the wedding forward. They didn't want to wait until the end of the year. They wanted to be officially married before the baby was born. So in July, they organized a simple ceremony at a small country estate in the home counties. There were only 30 guests. Anthony was there, as were Mrs. Celia and Mr. George. Marina's colleagues, some friends she had made at the gallery, people Gabriel knew from work, and of course Sophia, who was the happiest and most emotional bridesmaid anyone had ever seen. Marina wore a simple ivory-colored dress, flowing and comfortable to accommodate her growing belly. In her hair she had pinned the silver brooch Gabriel had given her, the delicate flower shining under the afternoon sun. Gabriel wore a navy blue suit, no tie, his eyes shining with emotion when he saw Marina walking towards him. There was no father to give her away, so she walked alone, but she didn't feel alone. She felt the presence of her mother of Teresa, like a soft breath on her shoulder, blessing that moment. The vows were simple but profound. Gabriel promised to love her every day, in the difficult and the easy, in the scary and the joyful. He promised to be her safe harbor, but also her adventure companion. Marina, in turn, promised to trust, to continue opening up, to build with him a life full of love and art. She promised that together they would transform their cracks into bridges. When the officiant declared them husband and wife, Gabriel kissed Marina with such tenderness that many of those present cried. And Marina, there in that moment, felt that she had finally found her home. Not in a place, but in a person. in Gabriel, in Sophia, in the family they were building together. The reception was joyful and relaxed. They ate, danced, laughed. Sophia gave an emotional speech about how happy she was to have a sister and soon a niece or nephew. Marina cried, Gabriel cried, almost everyone cried. When night fell and the guests began to leave, Marina and Gabriel sat under a starry sky, holding hands, observing the immensity above them. "Thank you," Marina said, breaking the silence. "For what?" Gabriel asked. "For not giving up on me, for seeing me when I was invisible, for loving me even when I didn't know how to love myself," she replied, her voice choked. Gabriel squeezed her hand. "You saved me as much as I saved you, Marina, maybe even more. You taught me that vulnerability isn't weakness, that opening your heart isn't dangerous when the right person is on the other side." They kissed under the stars, and it was like sealing not only their marriage, but everything they had overcome to get there. The following. Months were about preparation. Marina continued painting, but now her works reflected a new lightness, more vibrant colors, more hopeful themes. She did a series of watercolors about motherhood, about the fear and beauty of bringing a life into the world. Anthony was already planning the next exhibition. Gabriel renovated one of the rooms in the house, transforming it into a nursery. They painted the walls a soft yellow, assembled a wooden crib, filled shelves with children's books. Sophia helped every step of the way, her excitement contagious. In November, a baby girl was born. Small, perfect, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's brown hair, crying but healthy. Marina held her for the first time and felt a love so overwhelming, so intense, she could barely breathe. "Teresa," Marina whispered, looking at her daughter. "We'll call her Teresa." Gabriel, who was by the bed, smiled with teary eyes. "It's perfect." Sophia entered the room soon after, eager to meet her niece. She carefully took Teresa in her arms, gently rocking her, and hummed a lullaby that Gabriel used to sing to her when she was little. And there in that hospital room, surrounded by love and hope, the small family that had been formed by two broken people became complete. The years that followed were filled with happiness and challenges. Raising Teresa was not easy. There were sleepless nights, constant worries, moments of exhaustion. But there were also laughs, discoveries, the joy of watching a life grow and flourish. Marina continued painting, now with Teresa often by her side, scribbling on papers with crayons while her mother worked on her watercolors. Gabriel started drawing regularly again, and they developed a tradition. Every Sunday, the entire family, including Sophia, gathered for an afternoon of art. They drew, painted, created, together. Marina's second exhibition, titled New Beginnings, was even more successful than the first. The works, full of color and life, touched people deeply. An influential art critic wrote that Marina had the rare gift of transforming pain into beauty, of showing that the cracks we all carry are not signs of weakness, but of strength. Gabriel expanded his businesses, but never again at the expense of time with his family. He learned to delegate, to trust other people, not to carry the entire weight of the world on his shoulders. Sophia continued to flourish. She got a job in a library where she was loved by everyone. She met a kind young man who also had Down syndrome, and they started dating. Gabriel, initially apprehensive, soon realized that Sophia was happy, and that was all that mattered. And Marina finally allowed herself to be happy. Not a perfect happiness, not a life without challenges, but a real life, full of love, purpose, and genuine connections. She never forgot where she came from, the pains she faced, the fears she overcame. But she no longer defined herself by that. She defined herself by the choices she made, by the people she loved, by the art she created. One afternoon, years after that rainy night when it all began, Marina was sitting in the garden of the house she now called home. Teresa, at 5 years old, was playing with paints, making a glorious mess. Sophia was beside her, helping and laughing. Gabriel arrived from work and, seeing the scene, paused just to observe, his heart overflowing with gratitude. Marina looked up and saw Gabriel there, and they exchanged a smile. They didn't need words. That smile said everything. It said thank you, it said I love you, it said we made it. And they truly had. Two broken people who found each other in the storm and built together a life full of light. They discovered that the cracks they carried didn't make them less, but more, because it was through those cracks that the light entered, and it was that light that allowed them to flourish. Marina picked up her brush and began a new watercolor. This time she painted a family. Two adult figures, a young woman and a small child, all holding hands, walking towards a golden horizon. Below, she wrote a single word. Together. Because, in the end, that's what mattered. Not being alone, not having all the answers, not being perfect, but having someone by your side to brave the storms, to hold your hand in difficult moments, to celebrate the light in joyful times. And Marina finally understood that. She understood that love was not something to be feared but celebrated. That vulnerability was not weakness but courage. That cracks were not signs of breakage but of resilience. The story of Marina and Gabriel was not a fairy tale. It was better than that. It was real, it was human, it was about two people who, despite every reason to give up, chose to try, chose to open up, chose to love. And in the process, they discovered that the cracks they both carried did not separate them from the world, but connected them to it. Because everyone carries cracks, everyone knows pain, and everyone deserves the chance to let the light in. Dear listeners, we hope that the story of Marina and Gabriel has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of overcoming love and new beginnings, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments which moment most marked your soul. Every day we bring intense and true stories like this, which reveal the most human and sensitive side of each of us. Stories that remind us that no matter how broken we may be, there is always room for the light to enter. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode with another narrative that will move you from beginning to end. See you soon.